Happy New Year. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living in the heart of Las Cruces, where your center is still alive and well in our hearts, and where our vision is a world in loving partnership for the good of all. I am Teresa Valenzuela, and I'm your practitioner in service this morning. Our weekly spiritual circle discussion group continues into the new year on Wednesdays at 11 a.m., and there are still 2021 spiritual journals here at the center available for you to purchase from our bookstore. These journals are a way for you to keep notes and thoughts from our Sunday services. Also, the Association for Global New Thought is getting ready to start their annual season for nonviolence. It actually starts January 30th, and you will be able to find out events and things that are happening so that you can participate in this year's season for nonviolence. We fully believe in the principle of circulation and prosperity, and therefore we are a tithing community. Your tithes and offerings, in conjunction with the grant that we received here at the center, permits us to continue operations without any cuts in hours or pay for our staff, who continue mostly working from home. For this, we are so very grateful. This month, 10% of all we receive through your tithes and offerings are being tithed to the Aggie Cupboard. The mission of the Aggie Cupboard is to provide free supplementary food assistance to the New Mexico State University community, including Las Cruces and Doñana Community College students, faculty, and staff. We strive to create an atmosphere of care, concern, and support for those who may be struggling with food insecurity. The Aggie Cupboard works to educate on the prevalence of food insecurity and hunger experienced by the NMSU community. As your practitioner in service, I want to remind you that the practitioners are available to pray with you over the phone. If you do not have their phone number, call our office and we will have a practitioner call you back. And don't forget our prayer request button on our website, so you can still send us your prayer request. The confidential request goes directly to a practitioner, and we are still praying with you from our homes as we Zoom together at our usual time on Tuesday afternoons. Now it is time for song, silence, and prayer.
In this moment, I am grace. Grace is this moment. Grace, grace, grace. This moment is what I am. In this moment, I am peace. Peace is this moment. Peace, peace, peace. This moment is what I am. In this moment, I am still. Still is this moment. Still, still, still. This moment is what I am.
Oh, and as we step into that space and place of gratitude, as we have said goodbye to 2020 and have stepped forward into 2021 on a new journey, on new available opportunities to continue to grow and spiral upwards. For that, we are so, so very grateful. And so as we know that there is one divine creative mind, we know that we are one with that mind, and that Spirit works in, through, and around us, and is always for us. And as we know that, we also know that it is for us to share our gifts and our talents. And what a blessing our community is, not only to Las Cruces, but as we share this time together this Sunday morning, and as it goes out throughout the United States and the whole world, we are blessed. We are blessed to have our speaker today, Reverend Bonnie Smith, the beautiful music, and just that sense of oneness and belonging that we know is in our hearts and in our thoughts. For that, we are truly grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is. Today's reading is out of the Science of Mind, page 37. Spirit works for us by working through us. The thing, then, works for us by working through us and is us always. It cannot work for us in any other way. It spreads itself over the whole universe and shouts at us from every angle, but it can become power to us only when we recognize it as power. We cannot recognize that it is while we are believing that it is not. Hence, it is written, "They entered not in because of unbelief." Hebrews 4:6. We may enter in because of our belief, but we cannot enter while there is unbelief. Here we come to a house divided against itself. If we say we can only experience a little good, then we shall experience but a little good. But if we say with Emerson, "There is no great and no small to the soul that maketh all," then we may experience a greater good because we have conceived it. Therefore, our belief sets the limit to our demonstration of a principle which of itself is without limit. It is ready to fill everything because it is infinite. So it is not a question of its willingness nor of its ability. It is entirely a question of our own receptivity. And so it is.
Everybody is a star who can rain and chase the dust away. Everybody wants to shine, who come out on a cloudy day. Till the sun that loves you cloud, when the system tries to break you down. Never had to shine at night. Don't need darkness to do what you think is right. Ba 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 ba. Ooh. Ba 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 ba. Ooh, everybody is a star. I can feel it when you shine on me. I love you for who you are, and not the one you think you need to be. Ever catch a shining star? Ain't no stop till it's in the ground. Everybody is a star, one big circle going round and round. Ba 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 ba. Ooh, ba 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 ba. shine, shine.
Good morning and Happy New Year. Happy 2021. Finally arrived. I'm Reverend Bonnie, the community spiritual leader here at the Center in Las Cruces. And in our culture, we tend to start the new year off by creating New Year's resolutions, or we set goals. We determine what it is we'd like to see in the new year. And at our centers, our tradition is to review the first 4 books of the Science of Mind text, basically reviewing the basics of what it is we teach and the basic principles that we live by. By doing this, by reviewing what it is we believe in and what we teach, and by creating goals and resolutions for the new year, we sometimes also vision. We might do our own visioning or vision in a group or create a vision board, and all together we are trying to create a roadmap for what we want to see coming up in the coming year. Then we might use the tool of spiritual mind treatment to support our vision with a treatment, or we might write affirmations and put them around our house so that we see what it is we've committed to, the things that we want to see happen. And that is how we begin our new year and how we want to see where we're headed. As I was contemplating the new year the other day, I was out hanging laundry in my backyard, and over the fence I could hear the little neighbor girl playing with one of her friends. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the cadence of their conversation. And it was that na 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 na. And as I listened, I realized I knew what they were doing. They were playing pretend. And it made me smile. It made me remember the days when I used to play pretend. And I remembered watching Ben and his friends playing pretend. And I remembered how real it was in that moment. We would say things like, no, you don't say that, you say this. We really were involved and we just felt we were present in whatever it was we were playing about. And I started wondering, when did we stop playing pretend? How did playing pretend serve us when we were kids? And could it still serve us now? I thought about how Ernest Holmes refers to we need to feel that fire in the belly when we do a Science of Mind treatment. And I thought about the visioning process. And I remembered how we always state everything in the present tense. We act as if. And that third step of a treatment, the realization step, we're just fleshing out in our mind's eye what we see happening and how we see it happening. All of it, like I said, stated in the present tense. And so I thought, imagine visioning, or imagine doing a treatment with the enthusiasm and full immersion in that vision of playing pretend. Take a moment and bring into your mind's eye one New Year's resolution or New Year's desire that you might have going into 2021. And then imagine that you are 5 or 7 years old and you have a playmate with you. And now start directing the play. Whatever's going on in your environment, direct the conversations that are seeing that goal or that resolution manifest. Imagine when you're saying things like, well, now I say this, and then you say that, or I'm going to do this, and you do that. Imagine playing pretend and seeing what it is that you create. And if we think about it, when we played pretend, we were not creating a script for our life. Playing pretend was about seeing ourselves in a role. It was about believing for the moment that that role was true. And it was about believing we could do anything or be anyone we wanted to be. I encourage you to add some play pretend juice to your visioning and your treatments as we move into 2021. Now, some of you might be thinking about looking back on 2020 and saying, well, last year I had a really good vision and I saw it really clearly and it didn't turn out anything like what I envisioned. Or you might be thinking, well, every year I do a visioning and within a month or so, everything's different. I'm not doing what I said I wanted to do. It doesn't turn out like I envisioned. Well, I think most years are not as drastically different as 2020 turned out to be. But I did think about how it is sometimes we're going along in our year, or we're maybe on a journey, maybe we're on a trip, we're going along, and then all of a sudden everything around us looks completely different than what we expected. Maybe we're lost. Nothing looks familiar. The road signs don't match the ones that we have in our road map. Each year, we seem to get a little bit of that shows up. And so we might think, well, then what's the point of visioning if where we end up doesn't look like the roadmap we created at the beginning of the year? In the book that I read from before and that I'm still enjoying, 7,000 Ways to Listen, Mark Nepo talks about this. He said, I saw a large bird gliding over the highway, and it occurred to me that while a bird starts out with a direction in mind, it simply rides the currents. As human beings, though, we somehow overreach the currents, imagining routes and timetables that we have no control over. We call these routes and timetables goals. And if they're large enough, they become ambitions or aspirations. Then we adhere to them as if they were given to us by God. He said, somewhere along the way, I learned or taught myself to prepare for every detail, which was fine, but at some point, the preparations turned into goals that must be fulfilled, or I had the feeling something terrible was going to happen. Further on, he says, to tunnel our way through life toward intentions cast ahead of us as obligations is to actually bypass being touched by much of life. He also said the larger intention is to stay in relationship with everything that comes along, at least long enough to taste what is living. I loved that. And that really helped me to consider how it is we treat our visions, our goals, and our aspirations for the new year. And I've noticed that what happens, we have a tendency that when what we end up with doesn't look like what we expected, or maybe we do something unintended at the beginning of the year and we end up behaving in a way different than what we wanted, or we've done our vision and we're moving along and then all of a sudden life presents us with whatever, XYZ happens, say a pandemic shows up, we tend to look at the original vision and we say, it's wrong. The vision was wrong. So what's the point? Visioning doesn't work. I visioned this and I ended up over here. Well, as I thought about it, I started to consider, what if our ideas about how visioning works is what's wrong, so to speak, not the visioning process itself? What if we look at visioning, New Year's resolutions, setting goals, even the treatments that we do in a new way? What if each vision, each aha, each affirmation that we put in place is really like a breadcrumb that's been dropped along a path in front of us to help guide us along to a new view, a new vantage point? And instead of being something set in stone, the vision is part of the stepping stones that lead us to that place where we have a whole new vista in front of us. As we follow those breadcrumbs, that they lead us to a new choice point. And once we get there, we look out at the new view and we get to make a new vision, a new decision, a new choice, and maybe we move in a different direction. And then there in front of us on the pathway are more breadcrumbs that we get to follow. And as we do that, we begin to glide with the currents like the birds. Instead of creating a roadmap in January and then ignoring the view that shows up in March or July or October, we ride the currents, we follow those breadcrumbs, and we look out and make new decisions along the way at each new vantage point. About a month ago, I heard a TED Talk on the radio about a man who did something that I consider was much like that. He followed these amazing breadcrumbs, and his story actually became a breadcrumb for me in my path where I was at that time. He called himself at the beginning of the talk a curmudgeon. He said he was mostly negative and pessimistic about life, and he really wanted to change that. He wanted to become more positive. He had heard that if you want to become more positive, you needed to become more grateful and focus on gratitude. So that was his goal and his intention that he set. He decided to focus on one thing that he was going to be exceedingly grateful for, and he chose his cup of coffee in the morning. And so he decided when he got that cup of coffee, he looked at that barista and he said, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this cup of coffee." And her response was, "Well, all I did was make the coffee and give it to you. You really, if you're grateful for that coffee, you need to thank the people that grew the coffee beans." And that was the breadcrumb that started him on a trail. I think he spent about a year or two, I can't remember, following that trail. He went to where the coffee was grown. He thanked the growers. And the growers said, "Well, you don't just thank me, you need to thank the people that are picking it." So he went into the fields to thank the people who were picking it. And they said, "Well, but not just, thanking us isn't enough. You need to thank the people that drive the trucks that take what we pick away." So he went to thank the truck drivers. And then they said, "Well, you have to thank the people that made the trucks." And this trail led him through all the different people that were involved in bringing him that one cup of coffee in the morning. And as I heard that, it dropped that breadcrumb of gratitude in my trail because I was needing to hear focusing on gratitude at that time. And around the same time that I heard this story, a friend, a past colleague from college, posted on his Facebook page a book that had recently been published called The Boy in the Grave. And it's through a program called A Book by Me. And the goal of the Book by Me program is to seek to preserve the history of the Holocaust and other human rights issues. Our desire is to preserve the stories of the next generation so lessons of tolerance, empathy, hope, and respect are not lost. And this is just a short little book. It's a true story, and it's been illustrated by children. And the story is about a family who, during the Holocaust, in order to stay safe, they were Jewish, a farmer who wasn't Jewish allowed them to dig a hole under their barn, and they crawled into that hole so they could stay there hidden. And the farmer would occasionally put food into the hole so they would have something to eat. And at other times, the father would crawl out at night and forage through the forest to find the family things to eat. This family stayed in that hole for 19 months and 5 days. The only person that could stand up in that hole was the smallest child. Everyone else had to either sit or lay down. By the time the 19 months and 5 days was up and the war was over and they were told they could come out, some of them had to be carried out and a few had to crawl because their legs hadn't been used in so long. And so I read this book and I thought about, as we were moving in, because I read this at the same time we were moving into our second lockdown, and I thought, wow, I am experiencing something so far from being locked down. No one came to my house and locked the door. I wasn't having to hide under a barn and not be able to stand up or move in the dark. I was sitting in my home where I could go outside or go out front. I had fresh air. I had a comfortable bed. I had so much food to eat, more than I needed probably. And I realized that the breadcrumbs of gratitude just started to pile up in front of me as I had a whole new view of this experience that we're having at this time. And so as I continued to think about how the breadcrumb trails have worked in my life and how they've showed up, I thought about another situation that happened to me after I left college. My first job was a factory job, and I made the flaps that went over top of pockets on ball uniforms for the kids that played baseball and Little League. And I did that for 9 hours a day for 4 days a week and 4 hours on the 5th day. The same thing, just making these flaps over and over and over. I was starting to go stir crazy. The woman who was working the machine behind me, who had actually worked there for many, many, many years, she could tell, and she said, "You know, I saw an ad for a job for an occupational therapist at a local nursing home." Well, I didn't know what an occupational therapist was, but I had a degree in psychology and the word therapist was there, so I thought I'd go apply for the job. I followed that breadcrumb. I got there. The director of the nursing home had no more idea what an occupational therapist was than I did. But he had a person leaving a position that was called an activity director, and she and I had similar interests, and he felt like we had similar personalities. So he hired me on the spot to replace her position. So I'd followed that breadcrumb, and I'd found something completely different than what I was expecting. And it was through that job that I met a deaf family, learned sign language. They encouraged me to become an interpreter, and I took a completely different turn from what path I thought I was on after I'd graduated from college. That turn allowed me to find a job as an interpreter. Prior to that, I didn't even really know any deaf people. I didn't know there was a job called being an interpreter, but I'd followed all these breadcrumbs, and look where I ended up. And that job is what has allowed me to do my ministry even into today. So following those breadcrumbs can lead to places we least expect when we start out with our vision, whether it's at the beginning of the year or whenever we have it. Now, I know sometimes we might get on a path and we head toward a goal and we start to have these feelings, well, what if I'm making a mistake? What if this is wrong? What if this isn't the right thing to do? Or we might be going down a path and we feel like we really did make a mistake. We've done something horrible. Or maybe we've inadvertently hurt someone or did something that we didn't at all envision or expect when we thought about the year coming up. A couple weeks ago, when our prayer team started Zooming in together on Tuesday afternoon, several of us were on the screen before we'd gotten started, and we were sharing how within some of our families, people were struggling with guilt because they had done something that they felt was like this. One family member had exposed others in their family to COVID, and one of those people died. In another family, there had been arguments and disagreements that led to a death. And so people were struggling with guilt. And we started talking about how these kinds of things don't show up when we do our visioning and our dreaming about the year to come. And yet they do. And we remembered that Ernest Holmes taught that the universe holds nothing against us. On page 470, he says, "The universe holds nothing against us. No matter how many mistakes we have made, we are still perfect beings within, and that within may become the without if we will carefully train ourselves to listen to that inner voice of truth, which speaks to us in our moments of quietness and solitude." And so we talked about the importance of forgiveness and of self-forgiveness. And then, as he mentioned in there, someone else in our group reminded us that we also need to remember the importance of seeking and calling in that wisdom, that inner truth, before taking actions. Once we learn how this stuff works, it's really important for us to remember to move to that place, take time to go into our center and seek out that timeless wisdom at each choice point along our path. Our decisions along the way, our inadvertent actions that sometimes happen, or the way life unfolds, none of this is held against us. At any point, though, we can also go within and seek out that timeless wisdom for the next vision, which direction we want to go, and where we're going to find our next trail of breadcrumbs to follow. Years ago, I told my mother that I believed it was my life's purpose to become a mother. This distressed her for several reasons. First, her father had died when she was 5, and the idea that someone would purposely raise a child as a single parent was unthinkable to her. And she knew I had no intention of marrying. She then got concerned, well, if this is your life purpose, what happens to you when you've attained it? I thought at that time, well, we'll see when I get there. I guess I'll do the thing called mothering. But my mother was afraid that once I got a child, something would happen to me, that I might die because I had attained my life purpose. Neither one of us imagined that I would be going down this path and all of a sudden the path itself would disappear. None of us even asked what happens if our focal point for what we think is our life purpose is all of a sudden gone. It's not present. Well, Mark Nepo describes a bit of that in this same chapter. He said, I realized that what has caused so much anxiety in my life of plans is the fear that if thrown off course, whatever that means, life will leave town without me. How utterly silly. It's the other way around. God is fully present wherever we are. And when our plans are bent or split or reversed by the unexpected appearance of life in its many guises, this is often where the learning begins. And so, in reading this, it reminded me that when that path just disappears from in front of us, that is where the learning begins. So here I sit in a forest, lost, everything looking different than I expected, unsure of which way to go. And yet I've experienced enough of life to know that God is fully present even here. I need to just stop, go within, listen to that timeless wisdom that's in here, that resides within me, recognize that learning is beginning, and look for the next trail of breadcrumbs that'll help move me out of this forest. It is time once again to trust that the universe holds nothing against me, that each choice, each vision, each goal I've aspired to and that we all aspire to is a stepping stone along the way. It's all part of what Ernest Holmes calls this thing called life. So I move into visioning and prayer again. I'm going to add a bit of play pretend to my visioning and to my goals and resolutions. I know that each vision is not set in stone, but each vision connects us to that timeless wisdom within and is a stepping stone along that ever-evolving greater vision. I know in my heart that we're never really lost, no matter how unfamiliar the surroundings might become, no matter how different where I am now looks from what I thought it was going to look like when I had the original vision. I now understand how important it is to relax into and soar with the currents of life as I keep moving from breadcrumb to breadcrumb. And so it is. So just take a moment to breathe that idea in, to move into that place of timeless wisdom within you, to allow to surface to your mind's eye what it is that you want to see unfold in 2021, knowing that what you see here might be very different than what you see in March and July and October, and having the willingness and excitement and joy of visioning it so you can move along this path and follow those breadcrumbs to the next great vista. What's ahead? What opens up in front of you along the trail? I know that all along there are no mistakes. Each trail, whatever one we pick, is going to be the exact, perfect, right trail. All along the way will be breadcrumbs guiding us, inspiring us, lifting us up, and allowing us to know that no matter how strange the environment, God is forever present. And so for this awareness and for this knowingness, I am so grateful as I see all of us with the unknown of 2021 laid out in front of us, moving into the excitement of a child playing pretend, knowing that we are going to have a magnificent year no matter what shows up. So I just release these words and I send them out into this great universe, knowing they return to me multiplied, and I just give great thanks. And I hear us in my mind's eye all saying together, and so it is.
Another year we make a promise, another chance to turn it all around. And do not save this for tomorrow. Embrace the past and you can live for now. And love will give the world to you. Speak louder than the words before you and give them meaning no one else has found. The role we play is so important. We are the voices of the underground. And love will give the world to you. Say everything you've always wanted. Be not afraid of who you really are. A million suns that shine before me, a million stars, you are the brightest you. And love will give the world to you. The choice is up to you. Love will wait for you. 'Cause love will give the world, and love will give the world, and love will give the world to you. This is the new year. We are the voices. This is the new year. A new beginning. You made the promise. You are the brightest. We are the voices. This is the new year. We are the voices. This is the new year. We are the voices. This is the new year.
So once again, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank Randy and Mary Lynn for that explosive and wonderful entrance into our new year. Let's keep singing, let's keep dancing, let's keep playing pretend, and stay safe. Love you all.